All right guys, Cody Meyer here, Evergreen International Pro here with one of my favorite crankbaits. This has definitely been my go-to crankbait, really the last 3 years, and this is the Evergreen CR Crankbait. We have a whole series of crankbaits in this lineup, but the CR Crankbait, this is a very versatile crankbait. We're gonna have the CR6, the 8, the 10, 13, and 16. So depending on which water depths you are targeting, maybe that 6 to 8 foot grass and then all the way out to those, 15 to 20 foot rock piles, we are gonna have a crankbait for you. And let's get started with this crankbait. For one, this is a very easy crankbait to fish. You're gonna see this lip here. It's not very straining on your body when you're throwing the 13 or the 16. So if you're out, you're on that deep structure, you're firing this thing around in those deep rock piles, you're not gonna be just having to overwork the bait. It's very easy to fish. This thing casts extremely well. You're gonna have the weight transfer system in this bait here. So when you go back to make a cast, the weight's gonna come back to the tail. When you send that thing out, launch it forward, the weight's gonna go forward. You get that extra distance out of that cast. That is a very big deal. Trying to get a crankbait down to the desired depth, and this CR is gonna do it. We got a variety of fish catching colors. This is a crankbait to me that is a must have. It's tournament ready, out of the package, very easy to fish, great action, and this thing deflects off structure extremely well. Whether you're fishing, the 13 I have here in my hand, or the 8. I've caught them, fishing this thing around grass, rock, wood, maybe Gunnersville in some grass. You're gonna rip this thing through the grass. It just comes through stuff really well. It deflects off structure really well. And when this thing deflects off a rock or whatever it might be, you're gonna get a lot of reaction bites. So now let's head out on the water and let me show you guys how I fish a CR crankbait. When it comes to fishing the CR crankbait, first you're gonna wanna pick out the right crankbait for the structure you're fishing. So, right now we're fishing in that 12 to about 15 foot grass. I'm throwing the CR13. I'm just gonna wind this crankbait over the top of grass. So we're gonna slowly tick the top of the grass. And what you wanna do with the crankbait is try to make contact with that structure. So if you're throwing, the 16 footer and 15 foot of water, you wanna make sure you crank that bait down, you get to the structure, whether it be a rock pile, and make sure you keep that bait in the strike zone. So what I like to do is crank it down. When I start hitting the structure, I'm gonna slow that bait down, kind of feather the bait through the structure, give it a quick pause, pick it up, pause, maybe speed it up a little bit. I'm gonna vary my cadence of my retrieve. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to get that reaction strike. That crankbait's gonna bounce off a structure. That bait or that bass might be following that crankbait. They're gonna be right behind it. And as soon as it jumps off, the rock or whatever it might be, or if you stop, you go, you pause, it's gonna, react to that bait. You're gonna get a lot of bites. And what a fun way to catch fish. It's a bait you can cover a ton of water with. Again, I like to just kind of crank it through the water column, give it a quick stop, keep going. And if I feel some structure like grass, I'm always gonna clean the bait off. So, first identify where you're gonna throw this bait. If you're fishing in 6 foot grass, you're gonna want the CR6. If you're going down a rocky bank and it's about 8 to 10 feet of water, I'm gonna pick the CR10 up. Very easy to throw as well. You're gonna try to make as much contact with the structure as you possibly can. And the hook set is very simple too. When I feel that bite, I'm just gonna load into them. It's not gonna be, like you're flipping a mat and you get a bite and you just set as hard as you can. You just wanna load into them. You're gonna have these 2 treble hooks on here. And I don't wanna pull the bait out of the fish's mouth. So it's gonna be a real light, easy hook set. And that parabolic rod is gonna help you land a lot of these fish. This is a bait that I'm gonna throw, basically year round. Starting in the winter time, you're gonna slow it down a little bit. You're gonna be fishing the rock, depends where you're at in the country, but the craw patterns in that rock, basically from 5 to 20 foot. You know, through the spring, you're gonna get up a little bit tighter to the bank. You know, you might get on those 45-degree banks. You're gonna crank rock again. You know, pre-spawn is an amazing time to throw a crankbait. And once they're done spawning, it's a great time to get offshore, you know, fish some deeper grass like we're fishing, some brush piles, you know, maybe some of those ledges, and throw the deeper crankbaits. You know, that's one of the best times to throw that crankbait, catch a lot of big ones. And as you move into the fall, you know, those fish, again, they're gonna get grouped up, and they're gonna be grouped up, you know, from the bank out to that 20-foot range, sometimes deeper. It's a wonderful time to do it. That's another time I'm gonna switch it up to the shad patterns, wind it through those fish, catch a lot of fish, have some fun, and do really well in tournaments. Let's get into the gear. This is very important when you're throwing a crankbait, is the right line, rod, and reel. You know, starting with the rod here, you know, with actually the whole lineup, really from the 6 to the 16, I'm gonna want a longer rod, you know, a 7.4 to possibly an 8-foot rod, but I always prefer the 7.4 Daiwa Tatuli Elite rod. This is a cranking bladed jig rod, and this is a very parabolic rod. And the reason why this is so important, you do not want to pull these hooks out of the fish's mouth when they bite this bait. You know, you don't need something extremely sensitive when you're throwing a crankbait. You're not going for that very high modulus rod. You just want something very parabolic, you know, just a fast action, just slow bend. That way when you make a long cast, you're winding this thing around, you get that bite, you load into that fish, and you let the rod do the work for you. And they really nailed it here with Daiwa with this rod. Again, designed by Brent Ayler, really good for throwing a crankbait. And as far as a line, you know, typically when I'm throwing the CR, I'm gonna do a 10 to a 12-pound test fluorocarbon line. This is a Daiwa J Fluoro Samurai. I wanna get that bait down to the depth. So, you know, if I'm only fishing 6 foot, I'm gonna throw the CR6. If I'm out there and I really wanna get that thing down to 20 feet, 16, 20 feet, I'm gonna go with the 16. But the line is gonna help you get that bait to the depth that you want. And as far as a reel, very simple choice for me. I'm always gonna throw a 6:3 gear ratio. So I'm never gonna go any higher than that. Not a 7.1, not an 8.1. I'm gonna go with the 6:3. I like this Daiwa Tatuli Elite reel because you get maximum distance out of this reel. It's really a long casting reel, so that's important to me. I wanna make as long of a cast as I possibly can when I'm throwing a crankbait. This reel is gonna do it. 6:3 gear ratio with that longer rod, you know, the 7'4" is gonna be perfect for fishing these crankbaits. And you guys, again, if you like these crankbaits, you wanna see more, you wanna catch more fish, throwing a crankbait, make sure you guys check them out. They're gonna be available right now at tacklewarehouse.com.